Thanks so much. Yeah, so excited to talk about the ODX server a little bit more today. The topic for today's session is to use the ODX as a secure, scalable, and remote server architecture. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. So in our last session, if you remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about the many different types of data sources and methods for ingesting data into TimeXtender, into your ODX storage. And the two different methods are either leveraging ADF as the scalable compute for lifting and shifting that data into the cloud, or the alternative option is to use the ODX's built-in ADO.NET CData connectors. There are upwards of 230 of these connectors. So just because of the sheer magnitude of how many there are, this is often the most common method that we see people moving data in. So the question is, if you're moving data in using the ODX, which means you're actually leveraging the application server's memory and CPU for moving that data, how can you architect the best possible experience and most performant architecture for your users? And that brings us to this diagram here, where you'll see the TimeXtender desktop here at the bottom. You'll see the ODX service running here in the application server, and you'll also see the TimeXtender portal. We'll talk a little bit about these different pieces, but essentially what this will allow is it allows you to have the TimeXtender desktop interface installed on a local machine. This can be, maybe it's your work laptop, maybe it's a desktop machine supplied by your company. Either way, it's installed on the machine closest to you that you're using. And this allows you to have the cleanest, best experience for building a data warehouse architecture. I want you to think of other examples of this. One common example is Power BI, right? So when you're building dashboards in Power BI, the most common way to use it and the best experience is through Power BI Desktop. But of course, you're not accessing your data through Power BI Desktop, right? When you're done developing a dashboard, you publish that to the Power BI service, and those changes get executed through the Power BI service. And then, of course, you're accessing your data from online, but your development happens in a desktop interface. Now, TimeXtender is actually designed to work this way alongside the ODX server. So I want to talk about how you can set that up for the best possible experience. But essentially, this is going to allow you to have the local client for development. The ODX service continues to run in the application server, and this is what's handling the data ingestion, movement of that data whenever you're using any of the CData data sources, and then it'll load that data on into the data lake. The ODX is also responsible for loading the data from the data lake into the data warehouse target. So from the ODX storage into the data warehouse, or the MDW storage that you'll see here in this diagram. And what this means is that you can have a local desktop version of TimeXtender that you're executing, but the movement of data doesn't actually travel through your laptop at all. It's traveling through the application server, through the ODX service. And then there's a number of different ways you can monitor this activity. We'll go into how to set this architecture up, and then, of course, how the different ways in which you can monitor it as well. So before you get started, you are going to need to have a few things in place. A lot of these things we've built through previous TimeXtender Tuesday sessions. But first of all is the TimeXtender remote app server. So we do have this app server already running in Azure, and that's what we're going to be using today. What we're going to do today that's a little bit different from what we've done in the past is we're going to have TimeXtender also installed locally on my laptop, and we're going to show you how you can actually manage the remote ODX server from a local desktop client. You also, of course, need the ODX storage created and accessible, and read access to a data source, so we can show the execution of these different data sources. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing you need to do if you're going to set this up is we need to ensure that our local machine can access the ODX service that's in our app server. And to do that, we need to open up some firewall ports. Which ports? It's going to be the port that is configured to be used by the ODX service. And I'll show you where you can find that. So if we go into our app server, so this is our TX Tuesdays app server that we've been using. You can see TimeXtender open right here. It is connected to my ODX, and you can see that the ODX is actually running on this local machine. It does say local host. That means that the service that's running, the ODX service that's running, is on the same machine where this application is running, okay? And to see which port we're using, we can go to Tools and Options. And if we click on the ODX server tab here, we have port 20,000. All right, that is the default port that's used when you're first configuring the ODX service. You specify this when you run the ODX configuration. When you're installing it, you do specify this. The default is 20,000. So you can, of course, change this by rerunning the ODX configuration. You can change this port number. Another thing that's important here that we're going to need is the password to log into our ODX. I do have this saved, but again, this is another thing you configure when configuring the ODX. So we'll have this. We know that my server is this server. This is my app server. Again, we have my DNS name right here, port number 20,000, and then the password. So we are going to need those different things. So the first thing we want to do here is configure the ODX port in the Azure VM. So this VM, of course, is created and configured in Azure. If you are using a VM in some other method, you might have a different way of opening the firewall port for this VM. But in Azure, let's go ahead and open up the Azure portal. We do have the TX app server here, and we can click on networking. All right, on the overview pane, we can also click on networking here on the settings menu. So we'll click on networking, and then here we have, you can see the network interface settings, and we can specify certain ports we want to open in this network interface. All right, so we do need to open up port 20,000 here. I'm going to add an inbound rule source. I'm just going to leave this as any source port ranges. TimeXtender is going to use one of the Windows specified or Windows identified dynamic port ranges. You can Google quickly, Windows dynamic port ranges, and it'll give you a range of ports if you do want to specify that. But it's going to randomly pick within that range of dynamic ports. The service, this allows you to pick a standard common service here. This, of course, is less common, the ODX server. So we're going to choose custom. And we're going to choose the destination port range. Of course, this is going to be 20,000. So 20,000. And the protocol is TCP. So we can specify the TCP protocol. We want to allow this port. We can define the priority. I usually just leave it as default here as 1030. And then the name, we're going to name our rule. We're going to call it ODX port 1000. And I will click add. All right, so this is going to create the rule in my network interface attached to my virtual machine here. All right, while that's getting created, let's go ahead and jump into the virtual machine. We're now moving to step 3, where we need to configure the ODX port in the Windows Defender firewall on the Azure VM. So on this application server. All right, so we need to do that. So we know the port number. We can cancel out of this. Now we need to go to start, and you can just search firewall. And the option with advanced security is the one I usually like to choose. It does bring you into this. If you don't get this menu, just click on advanced settings in the Windows Defender firewall options, and then you should get to this window here. You want to click on inbound rules, and we want to create a rule. So we'll click on new rule. And this is going to be a port. Click next. TCP port, specific ports, and again, that's 20,000. We want to allow the connection. We need to specify the type of network. Windows selects a type of network. By default, it's public, but you may also define it as a private network that you're connected to, or if you're within a domain, it might be a domain network. So this is simply saying which type of network network connection do you want to allow. I'm just going to leave all three selected, and we're going to call this ODX port 20,000. Finish that up. So we created two rules, all right? One in our network security group in the Azure VM on the network card, and then the other in the Windows Firewall on the app server itself. The next thing we can do is we can actually test our connection. So from my desktop, I can use PowerShell to test the connection and make sure I can get connected to this machine. So this article here has, of course, further details in our knowledge base, and it gives you a nice little PowerShell command that you can use here. So I'm going to copy and paste this into PowerShell. Paste that in. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and just go. So the command is test net connection. And then you want to paste in the DNS name of the machine we're attempting to connect to. So we can just copy that DNS name here. Paste that in. And then we want port. So dash port 20,000. This is a great way to test network connectivity anywhere. If you're having any issues with maybe multiple environments or anything like that, you want to make sure that port is accessible. Very, very useful command here in PowerShell. So I'll hit enter. This is going to attempt to make the connection to that Azure VM through port 20,000 and see if it's open, and it was successful. So we know we can get connected. Great. So we've tested the port. We know we have connectivity. Next, we want to connect my desktop version of TimeXtender on my laptop here at home, and we want to connect to the ODX server. In addition to connecting to the ODX server, we also want to connect to our cloud repository. So the repository, of course, is storing all the metadata about our projects, and of course, we want to manage our projects from here as well. So the first thing I'm going to do here, we can go into project repository. You notice you can click right here in the status bar. You can also go to tools and options, and you can get in here to project repository settings. So I need to put in my server name and database name for my cloud, my Azure-based project repository database. And I'm using SQL authentication for this. Put in my credentials. Of course, we need to authenticate to this database. And put in my username and password. And then, of course, the database name is TX Project Repository. So I'll put that in as well. And then let's test the connection. Okay. So we do need to open a firewall here. I think that is a real quick setting I can make. Resource group. Go to that SQL server. We'll go to the firewall. Let's see, where's that firewall setting? Firewalls and virtual networks, and add client IP. So this is going to add my IP address from home and allow connection to this SQL server. So it's going to allow my home network to connect to this SQL server database in Azure. Open up TimeXtender, test the connection again, and now I'm connected. Good. So we open that firewall there as well. We'll click OK. And now we're connected to that cloud-based repository. So now I can manage the projects from TimeXtender Tuesdays on my local machine. The next thing we need to do is we need to connect to our ODX, which is also running in the cloud. So we click on the ODX server tab here, and we put our server name of the application server. This isn't the SQL server. This is the application server. So here we want to go to our TX app server. Again, copy our DNS name, go to TimeXtender, and paste in that server name. Again, port 20,000, And then you do need the ODX password. So you want to, of course, save this in a very special place where you can access it. And so I put in my password there, and now I want to test the connection. And I am now connected to that ODX server running in the cloud. So we'll click OK. And now I am connected. So now not only can I manage the projects that I have for TimeXtender Tuesdays, I can also manage the ODX. So that is very nice. So you can see the server name specified there. We can see my data sources and my different tasks and everything in there that I need. So now what I can do, let's open that application server once again. We have TimeXtender here. Move this to the side so we can see here's TimeXtender running in that Azure VM through RDP. Here's TimeXtender running in my local machine. I want to click on Manage. We can see that these are identical. They match. And now let's go ahead and execute. Now I'm again from my laptop. I can right click on a task and hit execute. And almost instantly you can see over here, this is now saying that it's running. It's running that task. So that is really great. That's one of the ways that you can monitor the executions happening in the cloud, right? You can see them just locally here inside of TimeXtender. So you can run them, you can manage them. Everything you need to do in TimeXtender, you can do from your local client desktop machine. You don't actually need to log in to your RDP once you have that ODX service running. So that's one way you can monitor it. From here, you can actually go in again on my local machine. So let's go ahead and minimize this. Let's say I'm just running from my desktop, working now. You can monitor and manage the execution tasks. If you want to see what's running, you can view the execution log, and we can see, okay, my task ran just now and it finished. Previously here, it looks like there was some errors. We can click on that entry. We can see the details of those errors. I believe I attempted to execute when my data source was not online. So you can see the self-hosted integration runtime is offline. And we can see all the details of those executions. Now, what if you're not in active development using TimeXtender? So you don't actually have TimeXtender open, readily available, but you do have executions running in the background that are running every day or every hour, whatever that is. And even though you're not in active development, you want to check on them every once in a while. You want to see how they're doing. You want to ensure that your data is getting up to date. Well, another way that you can monitor these executions in the ODX, again, because of this architecture where we have metadata available in the TimeXtender portal, you can monitor these executions in the portal itself. So what we do here is we'll open up a web browser. We go to portal.timextender.com. And then you want to log in, of course, with your same credentials that you normally would. We'll hit sign in, and you want to sign in with your business, your company's credentials. In this case, this is the credentials that I use, the email address that I use for this TimeXtender Tuesdays scenario. And we can see some company information here. We can see we have one task completed with errors. We can go to review here. Another way to access this is to go to environments and click on projects. And we have here my data lake project. So I can click go to details. All right, so we'll go to the details. And now if you remember in my ODX, right, I have this data source called REST. I have a data source called SQL Server. I have synchronize and transfer, load and sync. All right. And if we look in here in the web browser, my data source called REST, my data source called SQL Server, synchronize and transfer, load and sync. So it's a direct representation of what's in your ODX. So you can see what's happening. You can see what's going on. You can see the last executed, how long it took, whether it was successful or not. We see that error that I saw in the execution log. This is the exact one I ran a couple weeks ago. We can see that completed with errors. If we want to see more details, we can actually click on the task and we can see exactly what those errors were. So we can get real-time information on our ODX scheduled tasks and to see how they're running and how data is being updated in our data lake. Okay, so another topic that I want to cover here today is we touched on how to monitor these executions in the cloud. Again, you can do that locally from TimeXtender Desktop. You can do that from the TimeXtender Portal. Or, of course, the third option is you just RDP right into the application server. But really, the goal here is to not have to do that. And you really don't need to, as long as your ODX server is running on that application server. You can manage everything locally from your local machine. But what about troubleshooting common errors? What if you can't get connected to that? So if you go to this article here in the knowledge base, and if you look at the table of contents here on the right, you can actually click on troubleshooting common errors. And you can see a common error, of course, the most common error is the ports are not actually open. So again, you need to check the physical firewall that allows connections into the VM, and then you need to check the Windows firewall to be sure that port number 20,000 is open on for the ODX. The other common error here is not putting in the fully qualified DNS name. You either need to put in the static IP address of that virtual machine or the fully qualified DNS name here, which you can just copy from the Azure portal. So you want to be sure to use that full DNS name. Another common issue is, if your system, if your VM environment is highly secure, you may have certain IP addresses or ports that are obscured by other software or other methods that can make it a little bit difficult. So if you still are unable to get connections, again, use that PowerShell script to ensure you can get connected. Check to see if there's any specific antivirus software that might be blocking your connections as well. Okay. All right, so that about covers it for today and how to set up a secure, scalable, and remote server architecture using the ODX. All right, so if you have any questions, be happy to see them in the chat here, and we'll touch on them after the session. Feel free, if you do have questions, comments, thoughts, ideas about future topics, please be sure to visit the TimeXtender TX Tuesdays community forum. You can post ideas, you can chat about topics, you can post questions, and really engage further with the community. So Taylor, are there any specific questions that we can touch on? We do have about 7 more minutes left in the session.
Thanks, Joseph. Early on in the session, Rory had asked if there was a requirement for the FQDN on the ODX server hostname or if localhost would be fine. So I think we showed when we're filling in that server location in your app server that you just typed in localhost, but when we connected to the remote, we actually created that fully qualified path.
Yeah, exactly right. If you are on the local machine configuring TimeXtender Desktop on the local machine where the ODX server is running, localhost does work just fine. You can see that here. If we go into options, we'll see my ODX configuration. I am using localhost here, so that's fine. But of course, if you're on your client desktop machine, then you need to use that remote, fully qualified DNS name. Yep. Any other questions?
For the only ones we had so far. We do have a few more minutes, guys, if anybody has questions. While we're waiting, Joseph, so I think that for an active developer, oftentimes they would look at this execution log to see the details. I'm wondering, though, in your experience, when you see partners working on multiple projects, maybe they are going more to this TimeXtender portal to see pieces rather than logging into, say, 5 different VMs to look at the execution logs.
Yeah, what a great example of you being able to use the portal. If you are a TimeXtender partner and you are managing multiple different ODX instances and you want to get an overview to ensure your customers are getting their data up to date, you can absolutely use the TimeXtender portal to serve that purpose, right? You can actually log in and see multiple different instances of the ODX and have a dashboard of that here within the TimeXtender portal. So that is a great tool, great method to be able to monitor multiple different clients if you are a TimeXtender partner. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And Rory just brought up another question. Can the partner portal connect to the client's portal from one login?
That's a good question. We've been making a lot of updates to the portal recently. I don't know if you can yet, a partner can log in and see it directly from the partner's login. So you may have to use your customer login to log into their environment in the ODX portal to see that. And that, of course, is for security purposes, security reasons, to allow that. I think what we'll likely see in the near future is the ability for a client to give the partner access to that metadata to be able to monitor different clients. But right now, you do need a login on the client's account in the TimeXtender portal to then see their ODX information.
Now,
yeah, exactly.
One of the pieces that we use often with partners or other accounts is aliasing. So you are able to configure, say, like Outlook to alias. Joseph, I think you showed me that
Yes.
a while back.
Yeah, exactly right. This is something that Gmail supported for years now, but what's now called Microsoft 365, it was Office 365, does now support the plus email addresses. So as you can see, as you saw an example on mine, I'm actually using this here. This isn't my primary account as a TimeXtender employee. This is a separate account that I created for demo purposes, and you can see this JT Plus demo. We've enabled the plus email addressing in our instance of Microsoft 365, so that allows us to do this. And this, it's simply Office 365 just recognizes this as my email address, and this will come to my normal inbox. I can, of course, set up rules to move these messages where I need to, but allows me to essentially create or spoof my email address to create multiple different email addresses as needed. It's a great way to create different accounts across different